Good morning, Euroites! Welcome back to our second day of recorded lecture. Again, sorry I can't be there, because we are 1 day and counting before the review for the final exam, and 2 days and counting before the actual essay final exam. So, hopefully you guys are getting prepared for that by getting caught up in your reading. Hopefully you have done the Hobbes versus Locke handout reading, very short one, that will help summarize at least one of the potential essay topics. And hopefully you're getting all ready for the excitement of the French Revolution part as well by doing your Chambers reading. I would also recommend that you take a look at Sherman, because Sherman we will not actually do the oral exam on Sherman until after the finals week. However, there are some documents in there that could be helpful for this essay exam that's coming up, particularly some documents from Robespierre and I think his name is Jolicoeur, another one from a soldier named Jolicoeur. So there are some good documents in there that could be helpful, because today's information, the Reign of Terror, that's really the bread and butter for your essay. And so anything you can have to prepare you for the Reign of Terror would be excellent to get you ready for at least one of those essay topics. So the French Revolution, though, we saw began with all these beautiful ideals. And so today we're going to see how that, you could say, degenerated into terror. And the big question is, was it justified? Because when we get to the end of this topic, you guys are going to be debating as a class, as we usually do in our debates, debating as a class whether or not the Reign of Terror was justified. So keep that in your mind today as we go through things. But let's take a look at the progression of this revolution. We begin here with Crane Britton's fever chart of a revolution. Hopefully it's looking familiar to many of you. At the bottom you see that we have developing symptoms. And those developing symptoms were happening in the spring of 1789. So we had economic problems, we had hunger, we had famine, and we had a bourgeoisie and nobility that were sick of the things they were seeing from the upper nobles, from the king in particular, and their inability to reform the tax system. And so no one wanted to see the government crumble. Everyone wanted to advance their own status. Everyone wanted to see some changes. The question is, how far did they want to take those changes? So many in the first and second estates did not want to see dramatic change. They wanted things that would help them, of course. And then the bourgeoisie and the members of the third estate wanted much more dramatic change. It got locked down or bogged down into conservative reactionism already in May and June of 1789, and the king went along with it, being weak sauce, and allowed 1 vote per estate, and so that just ticked off a lot of people. Even in the first and second estates, ticked off some of those guys too. And you can see here from the tennis court oath, they're going to join hands together. These 3 estates, the more progressive members of all of them, coming together to bring about dramatic reform. Now, they didn't want to go radical right away. What they wanted to do was have a moderate revolution. They wanted to have a constitutional monarchy. They wanted to have things like the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, equality before the law, beautiful, idealistic things. But pretty soon, this National Assembly, these moderates, will have to deal with violence. And so the violence will immediately come right here in Paris, and then throughout the rest of the country they will have many other such events. And so this, of course, is which day? What do they call this day in France? Yes, I'm hearing all of you screaming out, Bastille Day, indeed. Or, for those of you that speak of the French, you'd call it Bastille. Alright, so, at the Bastille, we have revolutionary violence taking place, trying to guarantee the rights of themselves and their revolution, keeping them protected from the king's army, and this happened on which day in history? Yes, I can hear all of you screaming it out right now, thank you. I can hear above the hubbub screaming most vocally, Caitlin Root, saying July the 14th, 1789. Ah, excellent. All right, well done, everyone. So, there you go. The Bastille Day, July the 14th, 1789. We've got some glories happening. Then, we've got the Great Fear. In the countryside, the peasants must be satiated as well, because they are burning down manors, trying to gain their rights, trying to get rid of their debts, trying to get rid of their the nobles' privileges and gain their own status in the process. So these are the things that the National Assembly has to deal with within its first couple weeks of being in office. But then after 2 years of coming up with a constitution, they're thinking, hey, it's over. We've done a great job. Great. Our revolution is over, said Robespierre, because we have guaranteed the rights of man in this newly written and newly codified constitution of laws. And so everyone's thinking, oh, it's so perfect and beautiful. That's when disaster strikes, because war is on the brink. Of course, the Austrian Habsburgs are tired of seeing what's happening to their beloved Marie Antoinette and her hubby, who is frantically writing letters all over Europe to Prussia and princes in the Holy Roman Empire and the Austrian Habsburgs asking for assistance, and so war will break out on the borders of France. Now, of course, the émigrés will also be leading armies against France, trying to come back into France, and then we will have conservative refractory priests who refuse the oath of allegiance within the country, beginning a counter-revolution. So basically what we're starting to see here is that only 2 years after the revolution begins, we've got this international war, we've got counter-revolution, it looks as though it's going to crumble. And so the question is, what do you do? Well, the members of the newly elected National Convention decided, hey, let's take our revolution on the road. Best thing to do would be to solve our problems through violence. Yes, all right, so let's not only defend against these invaders, but let's also bring democracy to the rest of Europe. So they essentially go into all these other conservative areas of Europe and say, hey, Europeans, Austrians, Prussians, Holy Roman Empire, you guys take our democracy. And those other countries say, oh, you know, we really don't want your democracy. No, you really do want our democracy. Believe us. Take it. All right, so that's what we're going to see happening here. And then Napoleon, I'll just name drop him right now because I love him. He's going to be in the mix as well, as we'll find out very soon. Bopping around Italy. Oh, glorious. All right, so that's the situation. Then back at home in Paris, woo! September massacres. Can't trust anybody. So, because there's a bunch of refractory priests and émigrés and arrested conservatives sitting in the Parisian prisons, we got to get rid of them. So we killed, nearly 2,000 of them over the course of a week. All right, so that's what the National Convention is dealing with. And so they figure, after seeing the king try to run away, after seeing the king trying to destroy the revolution by writing letters to conservative powers around Europe, inviting them to bring their armies, they're thinking, maybe the best thing to do to end the counter-revolution is to remove the symbol of that counter-revolution, to kill the king. As we'll find out here, that won't be enough to stop the counter-revolution. So, as members of the National Convention, I want to know, what would you do? That's the big question. What would you do? Well, if you were a member of the Jacobin Club, you would have by now removed the other political opposition so that you could have some unanimous decision-making on bringing about revolutionary radical changes to deal with all of these massive problems that are facing the revolution. And so that was, of course, done during the purge of the National Convention, June the 2nd of 1793. They removed the Girondins and the more conservative members of the Plain, and then made sure that everyone is agreeing here on what needs to happen next. So they will take some dramatic steps. First, the Jacobins will appoint a 12-man committee for public safety, which is funny and ironic, I say, because the Committee for Public Safety was really more like a committee for killing and danger, so not safe at all. Oh, how cheeky. Okay, so the Jacobins, they're going to come in, and they, of course, will appoint Robespierre as the big gun on this committee, the lead man of this committee. And so what they will do is allow themselves to have temporary dictatorial powers to deal with the national emergency. Now, here's a little newsflash for you guys. I mean, the French are forgivable because they didn't know that this would happen. This was the first revolution to do this. First modern revolution to do this. However, we have learned better by now because of examples of the French and also the Russians, and then also the Nazis. Anytime you've got, a guy who says, or a group of people that say, hey, the situation's so bad, you should just suspend democracy and give us all the power. That's not a good idea. That's really not a good idea. We know that by now, right, Americans? Okay, so if ever in America we have a political leader or a president or a political party that's like, yo, let's just suspend democracy and give us power, just only temporarily, only for a little bit, so that we can deal with these problems, don't do it. Don't do it. If it happens during our lifetime, we grab our guns and we go defend the farm, right? Yeah, amen. America. All right, so temporary dictatorial powers, not going to be good here for many people. But then the other problem is, okay, well, arguably, maybe at this point in the French Revolution, that's what's needed. So, I mean, I look back on it and say, well, let's hope it never happens here. But if I were a Frenchman at the time, looking at the problems facing the National Convention, I might have to agree with these temporary dictatorial powers and with Robespierre. So, two major problems facing the National Convention, which may have made this definitely worth it to give Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety some power, because there are revolts all over the provinces. Here you can see this map. The things with the dots are areas where there are resistance. The areas with the line are areas where there is much larger resistance. And then the areas that are black are areas that are in full-out civil war. You know, just death and burning and pillaging everywhere because of resistance to the revolution, and then attempts by the pro-revolution people to put themselves back into power. So we've got absolute counter-revolution. What do you notice about this map? Paris, you might be able to see, is in the it's kind of like the, I don't know how to describe it exactly. I guess you could say the middle of the southeast corner. Yeah, if that helps. So it's the area where there's more white. Let's put it that way. There's more white up there, and then all around the borders, that's where you've got all of these problems. So that is, of course, because that's where the invading armies are coming in. That's where the refractory priests are, and that is where the Parisian government has less power. The National Convention has less influence on those areas. So we've got massive resistance in areas known as the Vendée Militaire. So the Vendée Militaire, that's something you're going to want to know, that is the black section to the left there. So that is in full-out revolt. Now, the moderates, some of the people that are revolting here are moderates, who are calling for a decentralized government. People like the Girondins. So the Girondins went back to areas like Gironde, which you notice is the bottom black province on the left, the southwest corner of France. The Girondins, they were moderates who wanted to see the end of this dictatorship they saw developing under the Jacobins and wanted to decentralize their government. Meanwhile, you've got the peasants. The peasants are refusing to be conscripted because they are sick of serving in the French military. By George, the French certainly need men right now, and they are needing that conscription, but the peasants are refusing. And then devout Catholic priests, refractory priests, who refuse to take the oath of allegiance, and then royalists and other foreign agents are working together to get these peasants excited against things like conscription and against the French government, and start a counter-revolution. So they're getting guns and money and leadership from all these types of people and inspiration from these people to resist the National Convention in Paris. And then another group that's resisting are the immigrés. So the immigrés, remember, they are the ones who left as of July 14th and after because they were fearful of the direction this revolution was taking. They are either coming back with more officers, more army from Austria or Prussia, or they have been hiding in the countryside, getting ready to lead the peasants. So, I mean, it's a bad thing, certainly, for the Revolutionary Army here, because 2/3 of the Army Officer Corps, being that they were men of birth, being that they were nobles, they took off. And so that means that we've got inexperienced leadership at the helm, right? So not a good thing here for the revolution, especially as they're trying to defend against both counter-revolution and against all kinds of problems on the borders with other powers. So the immigrés, they are being led, now that Louis XVI is dead, they're being led by Louis XVI's brother, all right? So Louis XVIII is what he'll become. He is the man that is going to be inspiring this counter-revolution all the way until the end. We'll see after Napoleon is taken down from power, Louis XVIII is going to be the man that will be brought back, this something like 80-year-old king, in order to help inspire the new France that will be developed after Napoleon falls. So, point being, we got a lot of people trying to take out the National Convention. So, what that means for the National Convention here is their army is driven back on all fronts. Now think about it. If you're a patriotic American, you are happy with the American Revolution that has happened, and you've got war on all sides of you. You've got people that are resisting this revolution. They're resisting the Declaration of Independence. They're resisting the National Constitution and our laws. they don't like the fact that you now are able to vote either. So what would you do? I mean, would you resist? Would you use violence to put this down? Or would you just say, oh, okay, I guess it wasn't so bad under the king. I guess it wasn't so bad under the nobility. I'll go back to paying 90% of the taxes even though I have no money. What would you do? Well, that's the big question. The fate of the revolution is at stake here. The question is, what would you do in this situation? Well, a guy like St. Just, he was I believe he was a member of the National Convention, but he was a Frenchman at the time, contemporary Frenchman, and he said, that which constitutes a republic is the total destruction of that which opposes it. Oh my. All right, so St. Just is telling us, well, maybe that what we got to do is go ahead and destroy all the opposition. Get rid of the counter-revolution. Do anything it takes to save our revolution. And that's what will be the Reign of Terror. So the Reign of Terror is going to come in June of 1793 and July of 1794. Oh, by the way, I realize I cut to the end of that slide rather quickly. If you need the quote there, I can give it to you later for your exam if you'd like to memorize it, potentially. Or, of course, it's also on YouTube. Yay, YouTube! All right, so what we're going to do here under the Reign of Terror is establish, first of all, total war. We realize in the National Convention that the only way to win this war is to kick some serious tail. The only way to do that is to combine the economy, combine a revolutionary reign of terror against counter-revolutionaries, and combine appeals to modern nationalism into one massive total war effort. That is the first time in history we've seen this happen, where you've got all of these things coming together into a confluence of events and helping France to seriously turn the tables in favor of their revolution here and defend their revolution. Part of the way they're going to do this is finally start to guarantee the economy for the working class in the urban centers, because these are the most revolutionary people in this revolution, the sans-culottes. They're the most revolutionary group in the revolution, because the peasants, they've been satisfied ever since they got rid of noble privileges, because they can grow their own food, right? They're not starving. But the sans-culottes, they've been hungry since before 1789, and they want those guarantees of daily bread, especially now that they're being told they need to go fight in a total war. So, what the CPS, Committee of Public Safety, will do, and the National Convention will do, is create a planned economy. So they're going to have emergency socialism, meaning temporary socialism. Now what they're going to do is first create a law of maximum. You've got a bunch of dirty capitalists out there that wanted to make money, imagine that, right? Wanted to make money off of setting higher prices, and during wartime you can do that. That makes you a profiteer, right? You're able to set higher prices because, hey, times are bad. You're going to have to pay the price if you want good bread that isn't moldy, you know, or shoes or what have you. So the law of maximum, though, is going to set maximum allowable prices on staple products, things like bread and shoes. So these staple products are going to be necessary, obviously, for feeding the masses and clothing the masses, and now dirty capitalists are not able to make a huge profit on that. They're only going to be able to set a maximum price, thus getting rid of competition and making it so that people can actually afford these things as well. So what they will do is get rid of things like white bread, and they will get rid of pastries and delicacies, because those were delicacies reserved for the nobility and people who had money, which the sans-culottes do not have. So the government will demand, all right, well, we're not going to have any of those fancy breads anymore, or delicacies, what have you, crepes, fun things like that. Instead, we're going to have dark rye bread, the grainy stuff like Roman meal. You know, it's got chunks of things in there that you got to pick out of your teeth. That's the bread of equality, brother. That is equality right there. Everybody's eating the same kind of bread. So that's going to be one of the issues under the law of maximum. Next, what they're going to do is nationalize shops and factories, because you had, you know, formerly a shoemaker that would make fancy women's shoes, or you would have a tailor that would make fancy men's attire, or you know, that kind of thing. And now you're going to take those factories and say, nope, you are making military uniforms, you are making shoes for the sans-culottes, you are making boots for the army, you are making France. And so now we're going to nationalize those things, making it so that the economy is going to be totally geared towards war, totally geared towards arms and munitions output. This will sound familiar for those of you that remember America during World War I and World War II. That's what we did, and that's why we won. And that's why France is going to do awesome right here, because they will nationalize the economy under emergency socialism. It will be a huge help, as we'll find out. All right, and then the Reign of Terror is going to also come in as a political tool. It's supposed to be a method of striking terror into the hearts of enemies. Now, Robespierre is leading this thing, and when you read Robespierre's document in Sherman, you'll find out that Robespierre believed in this ideal of using both virtue and terror. What he wanted to do was be able to use the revolutionary reign of terror as a method of basically an impartial tool politically to take out anyone who could be seen as an enemy of the revolution. Now, the reason is not for his own power, so he says, nor is it for dictatorship, so he says, nor is it for, anything to, just kill people violently and see blood in the streets, so he says. So those things are not the total intention. The intention here is to use violence for the method of promoting public virtue, for promoting love of the revolution, for promoting safety of the people. So what he will do is set up some revolutionary tribunals that are answerable only to Robespierre and to the CPS. Here you can see one of those examples. You've got a people's court, where you've got average citizens, average bourgeoisie and sans-culottes coming together, sitting at a large table, demanding the heads of conservative refractory priests or conservative members of society or nobility that were arrested, émigrés that have been arrested, and putting them on trial. So the reason they have to do this is because, first of all, they need swift justice to get rid of some of the counter-revolutionary movement leaders. But secondly, they just don't have the court system. I mean, a lot of those members of the courts left during the revolution, so they need a court system that can take care of justice quickly, because Robespierre and the CPS don't have time for all these different trials. So what they will do is set up tribunals. And so under the law of suspects, they will basically come up with a list of what constitutes an enemy of the people, and they will be put on trial. And if you can be determined for any reason to be considered an enemy of the people, then you will be killed. All right, and so groups of people that were seen as enemies of the people. We have the Girondists. We also have the Federalists, people who opposed the central government in Paris and wanted a more federalized system in which the counties around France would almost act as states with a federal government in Paris. So Robespierre and the CPS didn't like that because, again, they are quote-unquote temporary dictators. And then you've got the émigré priests and nobles. So these people who are leading the counter-revolution because they oppose the oath of allegiance or oppose the revolution itself. And then we've also got war profiteers. So war profiteers, again, are people who, bourgeois, fat cat capitalists that are trying to make money off of the war effort and making it hard for the people as a result. You can imagine a sans-culotte who gets a war profiteer in front of his tribunal is going to have a good time sending him to the guillotine. Yeah, all right. And then even the sans-culottes are going to be brought in here for disciplinary reasons, because Robespierre saw that the sans-culottes were, a little too radical at times, a little too indirected at times. Sometimes the revolution that is supposed to inspire these people ends up turning in on itself, as we'll see. And so the sans-culottes will even be brought up on trial for various things. The biggest thing that the sans-culottes will be brought up on for charges of, though, it's interesting, because the number one thing that you had to do when you were in Paris or any urban center of France at this time that was pro-revolution, what you had to do was wear the attire of the French Revolution. So I'll show you examples of that in a bit. But let's say that you were not wearing your red hat, your red floppy sock hat that the sans-culotte citizens wore. Then you would be said to be a counter-revolutionary, and you would be put on trial for it. All right, let's say that you were not wearing your cool red and white pants. Then you would be said to be a counter-revolutionary. Let's say that you went around and you accidentally used the honorific of Madame or Monsieur, which is traditional, rather than using the newly in vogue citizen, I think is how you pronounce it. So rather than calling a person citizen, and you accidentally called them Madame, or Madame, you could be seen as a counter-revolutionary. revolutionary. So those are the kind. I mean, you got to mind your P's and Q's, brother. That's the lesson here under the law of suspects, because you, for any reason, could be an enemy of the people, which will mean you go right here. Ugh. All right, 40,000 people killed by the guillotine. Blood will run red through the streets of Paris and other centers around France that were using the guillotine as well, with over 300,000 imprisoned. It is not going to be pretty. That's not even including the things that we'll see in the counter-revolution around the rural areas, because you'll have Jacobin governments in areas like Lyon, for instance, or Marseille, that are going to have a bunch of refractory priests and a bunch of people that they had captured in the Vendée Militaire, and they're going to put them on a boat, and they're going to send them out into a river, and they're going to set that boat on fire. So obviously, parts of the boat will not catch on fire because it's water, but the boat itself is going to catch on fire with the people inside, and so their screams will be heard as the revolutionaries are laughing from the shore. Other times they will send these priests and émigrés and counter-revolutionaries to swim out into lakes as they shoot them. And so it's not going to be pretty. It's just going to be terror, absolute terror. And so the goal here was to be a political weapon directed impartially. The question is it really a political weapon directed impartially? I mean, you're sending all kinds of people to the guillotine. And as you recall from our discussion before Christmas, the guillotine, they said it was supposed to be more humane. And I mean, I guess, rather than being broken on the wheel, it was more humane. But then again, they did. There have been some studies that have shown that after the head has been removed, the brain continues to function for another 8 seconds because there is still blood and air that circulates through the brain for 8 seconds. So that would mean that your brain is still cogitating. Oh, wow, hey, that hurt. Wow, my head is in a different position now. Oh, there's my body. Okay, and yeah, there's a lot of blood here, and oh, things are getting fuzzy. Oh, wow, that's gross. My face is right on top of this lady's face. And dead. Fade away. Okay, that was approximately 8 seconds, right? All right, so, really, is this kind of thing a political weapon directed impartially? I don't know. Sounds like it could turn into a perversion of the ideals of 1789. I don't know. So therein is our debate, ladies and gentlemen. You will have fun debating that. I'll kind of leave that one open-ended for you. But here's an example of how things are turning out. Marat. You remember Jean-Paul Marat, one of the most radical of the Jacobins and the revolutionaries at the time, member of the press. He, during the course of this reign of terror, once called for the execution of 200. Right, so at the start of the Reign of Terror, very start of the Reign of Terror in the summer of 1793, said, we need to execute 200 people in the streets to send a message to the other counter-revolutionaries. Well, that didn't do it. So then he called for the execution of 200,000. So, I mean, it's obviously getting out of hand by the spring and summer of 1794. And so a woman by the name of Charlotte Corday came in and came onto one of the lists that he had of possible traitors. And so because she ended up on his list of possible traitors, she knew that she would be arrested and sent to the guillotine, because anybody who ends up on Marat's list of traitors and gets published in the press with their name, they're sure to be killed. So what she did is she simply snuck into his room. She snuck in knowing that he was in the bathtub, because he spent most of his days now in the bathtub due to a skin disease similar to eczema, which he acquired when he lived in the sewers of Paris. So he was sitting in this medicinal tub, writing up one of his articles, and boom! Knife to the heart. Oh, man, a couple of stabs to the chest, and Marat slowly died, bled to death in his own bathtub. You can see this beautiful piece of art from Jacques-Louis David. Jacques-Louis David giving us a very idealized picture of Jean-Paul Marat. As he's writing his last words, the blood is spattered on his document. The blood is in the tub and barely seeping over the edge, and he looks like a saintly hero that has been martyred for a glorious cause. Because, of course, Jacques-Louis David was quite the revolutionary as well as propagandist for the revolution. So, at her trial, Charlotte Corday was asked what she hoped to accomplish by killing Jean-Paul Marat, and she said, "Peace. Now that he is dead, peace will return to my country." Well, sorry about that, Charlotte Corday, but there's a lot more people other than Marat who wanted the Reign of Terror. And the question is why? I mean, they saw what they had in 1789, and it was at stake here, wasn't it? Because with the war all around them and the counter-revolutionaries, they may not survive. This revolution may not survive unless they get rid of counter-revolutionaries and people that are enemies of the people. So, I mean, that's the big question. Is it worth it? So, Robespierre certainly thought so, and so he's trying to create a new system that's going to glorify the state above all else and glorify the ideals of the revolution, effectively combining those ideas of virtue and terror. Because remember, it's not just terror that he wants. He wants public virtue. The whole purpose of this violence for Robespierre, this idealist, is to promote public virtue. So what he's going to do is start by doing things that are, I mean, he's not only going to use violence to do this, he's going to try and create a new popular culture of virtue and love of nation. Now you want to pay particular attention to this, because this is very important for your final exam. Hint, hint. Okay, so new popular culture of virtue and love of nation. So what they're going to do is set up all kinds of Republican symbols to replace the old ancien regime and create a new republic of virtue. So for instance, they're going to tear down statues of kings. So they will tear them down. Thankfully, a few of Louis XIV survived. Not because they wanted them to, just because they somehow didn't destroy them and they were removed and put somewhere safe, I guess, because we still have those. Thankfully, I love Louis XIV. And you know, they basically tore down the edifices and the street signs of every noble name, every monarch throughout French history, except for one. Anyone remember which monarchical symbol and statues they saved from destruction during the course of the French Revolution? Anyone remember? Who was that king? Yes, maybe one of you shouted that out. It was Henry IV, Henry of Navarre. They loved that guy, because he was really like a king of the people. What a cool dude. All right, so another thing they're going to do, though, is start to put up new edifices of this Republic of Virtue. So you can see on the left, we've got a feminine Lady Justice. Now, excuse me, the effeminate symbol here, you might recall from reading in Chambers, the effeminate symbol is important because she's seen as being soft, accepting, willing to take the people's concerns, and then you can see at her feet is égalité, which of course en français means equality. So we've got equality and Lady Justice combined here. Everyone is equal before the law. That's a soft, inviting kind of symbol. But then on the right we've got Mr. Republic of Virtue. We've got Mr. French Revolution. And Mr. French Revolution is displayed as Hercules here. Basically, you don't mess with Hercules. You want to be that counter-revolutionary snake figure down below? You gon' get owned, brother. You gon' get owned. That's right. So, fun symbols for you. All right, so they're also going to create a new revolutionary calendar. So the new calendar is going to get rid of the old system that was based in the Gregorian calendar. Part of the reason they're getting rid of it is because, I mean, the Gregorian calendar and the French calendar of national holidays was filled with saints' days. I mean, you've basically got a saint's feast or a saint's day happening, you know, a couple times a week, and that would mean, and then obviously Sundays as well, and then that would mean days off. And so the French Revolution, first of all, needs workers working all the time, and they also don't want to celebrate the saints of old. They don't want to celebrate the Ancien Regime or the Catholic Church and their saints, and so they will bring in revolutionary holidays. And this calendar will begin as year one, beginning in 1792, the birth of the Republic. And so the birth of the Republic will constitute this new calendar. And I'll have a video that gives you a little more detail on that in a minute, so pay attention to the video here. All right, next we've got open-air festivals to celebrate the glories of the revolution. Anything they can do to celebrate how awesome this revolution is, they will do in these beautiful open-air festivals that we'll also see here in a minute in the video. But the point here is we want to, I mean, it's basically like Bastille Day will become a huge event. Obviously, the formation of the Republic in September of 1792 will be heralded as a huge event as well. All of these fun Republican holidays will be set up. And then honorifics such as Madame and Monsieur will be replaced by Citizen, as we talked about earlier. Another thing they're going to do is change the clothing styles. So here you can see those fancy duds that I was telling you about earlier. You can see these men carrying the Bastille as a symbol, almost like an Ark of the Covenant, as, yo, look what we did, we're pretty awesome. So the sans-culottes feeling pretty good about themselves. selves. They've got their red sock hats, their blue jackets, their red stripy pants. Awesome. So keep in mind, guys, I think Monday the 21st of January, I believe it's a Monday, that is Regicide Day. So, hey, by all means, wear your sans culotte attire. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. I plan on wearing my sans culotte attire, so get ready for that fun stuff. So, another thing that we see right here, you can see the ladies are dressing differently as well. There's their fun revolutionary attire. That's the cool new Vogue look for a woman. If you want to look hot and awesome, you got to be dressed like this lady, this Poisson woman, who is one of the fishmongers that we heard about who attacked at Versailles on October the 5th of 1789. And then, of course, the cool stripy pants. Man, I wish those would come back into style. And then another thing they're going to do is de-Christianization. Got to say, big mistake here, because this is going to only galvanize the counter-revolution anymore, as if to be like, see how bad this revolution has gotten? See how ungodlike this revolution is? Because now they are de-Christianizing, removing saintly symbols through things like the calendar, removing saintly holidays, removing saints' edifices and churches, and now they're turning churches into these areas where they have the cult of the Supreme Being. So churches will now be used, even places like Notre Dame, will now be used as areas to celebrate the Republic and the cult and the Supreme Being. The Supreme Being is seen as this not exactly God, but it's kind of in the deism sort of belief, where the Supreme Being is this enlightened ideal, this enlightened spirit that is changing the world through the French Revolution. And so here, got a little video for you about it.
The revolution has hardened Robespierre. Once an impassioned supporter of a free press, he now reinstates censorship, a vestige of the old regime. And with the church already under attack, Robespierre stands idly by as one of the most radical revolutionaries. Jacques-René Hébert proposes a new agenda: de-Christianization.
When the crisis of the war and internal rebellion is at its height, people begin to say the root of all the problem is priests, is religion. And what we've got to do, if we're ever going to be safe against the enemies of revolution, is destroy the power of the Catholic Church. Superstition, fanaticism, that's what religion's all about, and therefore what we have to do is stamp out this whole thing entirely.
Streets carrying the word saint are renamed. Religious icons are destroyed and replaced with tributes to the new saint, Marat.
The church came to seem simply the enemy to the radical revolutionaries. Churches and cathedrals are simply stripped of their altars. Stained glass is smashed, statues are smashed, the wealth of the churches is simply carted off. Of course, for European opinion, this was something even more shocking than the death of the king.
Not even the Christian calendar is spared. Years are numbered no longer from the birth of Christ, but from September 1792, the overthrow of the monarchy. It is now year 1. Months are renamed according to the seasons. July becomes Thermidor, April, Floreal. Months are broken into 3 weeks of 10 days each.
The revolutionary calendar was certainly designed as a kind of weapon against Christianity, against Christian belief. Of course, by having a 10-day week, you'd no longer have Sundays, so people wouldn't even know what day Sunday was anymore. That's what they hoped.
Yikes. Okay, so Robespierre taking it pretty extreme here. People are really starting to wonder about Robespierre too, because in some of these festivals of the cult of the Supreme Being, he would actually have this huge parade, basically, in which the people would be dancing in their laurels and dancing in their Roman attire, their togas, and they would have this massive stage erected in which, at the climactic moment of the celebration, out would walk Robespierre wearing his toga and his laurel, and he would just hold out his arms as if to say, "Yo, I'm the incorruptible. I'm basically the first saint, or the son of the cult of the Supreme Being. Oh, yes, you should glorify me." At this point, people are really starting to wonder, not only in around Europe, but also in France. And we'll see this will be Robespierre's downfall. All right, but first we're going to take a look at the effects of this. So, again, I asked the question at the beginning of this thing, whether or not the Reign of Terror was worth it, whether or not it was justified, whether or not the violence and the terror was within reason considering the things that the Republic was facing. So here we'll see the effects of it. Hopefully I'm not out of time at this point. If I am, this is an okay place to stop. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of hurry through this a little bit for you. That way, we can have everything that we need for the final exam and after. So, modern nationalism is going to be harnessed here by the state. They're going to effectively use this modern nationalism to get people on board with this war, because they know that if this international war and this counter-revolution is successful, the revolution will be over. The revolution will be destroyed, and the Ancien regime will be reestablished under Louis XVIII. And so there must be a patriotic dedication to the national state and national mission. And so that's what this nationalism is trying to get people to do, to be everything for the state and to do everything for the state, because they are no longer fighting for a king. They're no longer even fighting for a flag or a symbol. Now what they are fighting for is la patrie and la nation. And so they are fighting for the people, la patrie, the people, and la nation, the nation. And so now they will give everything for the people and the state, or the nation, because without it, they feel they are nothing. And so we get some great quotes here. One is from a secondary source, from a historian by the name of Perry. Perry tells us that the citizen is born, lives, and dies for the fatherland. Ooh, how cool is that, huh? That's a good quote. Total dedication. And then we get this idea that everyone must participate in this war effort, no matter who you are. Obviously, do not write down this quote. It's a big one, but it is a cool quote. It's from a decree from the National Convention and the CPS on August the 23rd of 1793, which said, "The young men shall go to battle, and the married men shall forge arms. The women shall make tents and clothes, and shall serve in the hospitals. Children shall tear rags into lint. The old man will be guided to the public places of the cities to kindle the courage of the young warriors, and to preach the unity of the Republic and the hatred of kings." Woo! How exciting! All right, so John Mackay tells us, another historian, secondary source, John Mackay tells us that war in 1793 was a crusade, and indeed it was, because everyone knew that if they did not win, they would lose the revolution, so they figured, hey, let's liberate Europe. Let's bring our democracy to Europe and provide a glorious revolution to all nations who are oppressed by monarchies. But in the process, they're also forcing democracy down people's throats who don't want it. So, questionable. But anyway, nonetheless, it's working, because now unmarried men are going to be conscripted into the army by August of 93 in what's called the levée en masse. So the levée en masse is a massive levy of soldiers to be conscripted into the army. This, of course, is royally going to tick off the ruralites, especially the peasants. But people in Paris and people in the urban centers are not totally, but a lot of them are in favor of it, because they're the ones that are facing the most patriotic type of appeals. So they are immersed in patriotic dedication and propaganda, so they are going along with it while the countryside revolts against it. Okay, and so, but it will be effective, because by January of 1794, France will create one of the largest armies in Europe. They'll have 800,000 men serving across all their borders, combating both counter-revolution and international war. So this is going to be huge, because the French armies, when they're on a given battlefield, they're going to have a 4-to-1 advantage against their opponents. Now, I mean, yes, the opponents have the skilled generals, they've got the tactician knowledge, they've got the, they know how to make men march in their plumed hats and do cool little turns and all of that fun stuff. But when you got 4-to-1, it doesn't matter. You just run at them and shoot the crap out of them, and then boom, you win. So a French general is going to take this very idea. He was a French general who was not born into his position, but he earned it through talent and through dedication to the revolution. He said there will be no maneuvering, nothing elaborate, just cold steel, passion, and patriotism. Yeah, that's pretty cool. All right, so by the spring of 1794, French armies will be victorious on all fronts. Woo! All right, gotta say, ladies and gentlemen, Reign of Terror, little ugly, kind of would stink to be one of those people, that would end up on the guillotine. Not loving that, but gotta say, hey, It worked.